I have brand new details on the case of the college cheerleader beauty queen accused of disposing her newborn baby's body in a trash bag in her closet. We're learning more details about who allegedly found that baby and the condition that the newborn was in, not to mention the shocking place that Laken Snelling allegedly was when police arrived at her home, and it wasn't there. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We are starting to get some new information from police about what they saw when they arrived at Laken Snelling's home, and new information on the condition that her newborn was in. TV station Fox 56 in Lexington, Kentucky is the first media outlet to get the incident report from police detailing what they saw when they responded to Laken Snelling's off-campus apartment on Wednesday, August 27th. Not only did police give some key information about the condition of that infant's body, I'll tell you that in just a moment, we're also learning more about who was the person who called police that morning just after 10:30. So the report says it was a third party. The TV station says the name was redacted from the report that they have. What we take from that, it wasn't Snelling herself. Perhaps it was a roommate, but we don't have that information yet. Police have not shared it. Snelling has unenrolled from the University of Kentucky, where she was a student in the wake of her arrest. She'd been a member of the Wildcats stunt cheerleading team. Here's her picture on the school's website. Here's video of Snelling competing with the team in a video posted 4 months ago per Flow Cheer on YouTube. So it is possible that she was pregnant during this event. Now, police say when they arrived, just after 10:30 in the morning, the third-party caller was the person who found the infant wrapped in a towel, placed in a black trash bag in a closet. Now, it's unclear how Snelling's baby died. This, at this point, is not a murder investigation. It's also not a manslaughter case. An initial autopsy came back inconclusive, and more tests are being done to learn the cause of death. And that will be a major turning point, potentially, in how the case plays out. It's also unclear exactly how old the baby was and how far along Laken Snelling was in her pregnancy when she gave birth. We do know it was a baby boy. Police initially said that Laken admitted to them that she was the mother of this child, that she had given birth to this baby. She also allegedly told them that she tried to clean up and hide the baby boy and everything associated with him, and there were other cleaning supplies and things like that in the trash bag where that baby's body was found, according to police. Now, a major development in this report that has just come in through Fox 56 in Lexington is that police write that the baby boy was cold to the touch. And that could mean a lot of things. It could mean that the infant was dead and left unattended for hours. Police also say in this report that Snelling was not home at the time police arrived. Police actually had to search for her for almost an hour until she was found at 11:18 in the morning. Snelling is then said to be at Lexington Police Headquarters, where she was asked to be, quote, checked out. And a medical team responded to the police station. The report says that Snelling was put under arrest on August 27th around 5 o'clock that evening, but she wasn't booked into the county jail until August 31st, a couple days later. Now, we know that police are trying to learn still who the father is of this baby that Laken Snelling gave birth to. We do know an ex-boyfriend of hers named Isaiah Hall has provided a DNA sample to police. His dad told the New York Post that it could take several weeks until that DNA sample comes back. All he's saying is that his son was asked by police to provide a sample, and so he did. But after dating Hall, the Post reports that Snelling was dating someone new. More recently, a man named Connor Jordan, who's a former college basketball player, and we see several pictures of Snelling and Jordan together, but it's unclear if he's the father of this baby or if the two of them are still in a relationship. Snelling also used to be a beauty queen. She often posted on social media, spending time with her friends. She really gave off this happy image, a very warm image. Of course, now she is accused of a very dark crime. It's unclear how many people around Snelling were aware that she was pregnant. She was, of course, continuing on with the cheerleading team. She's on the top of human pyramids. And she also stopped posting on social media around June of last year. And before that, from what we've seen, she was very active on social media. So it's kind of interesting that in June, her social media trail just drops off. This was her final post on TikTok from June, and it's a picture with emojis that describe her. And in the bottom left, we notice there is that one that says goals. And that shows an emoji of a mom with a child. So it does appear that she at least presented publicly that she one day wanted to be a mom. This is video of Laken Snelling at her first court appearance. She's 21 years old. She appeared in a red dress. She pleaded not guilty to charges of abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. This video per WBIR TV. Snelling posted a $100,000 bond and is now on house arrest living with her parents. She doesn't have to wear an ankle monitor. She's pleaded not guilty to the charges. And even though Snelling, again, she very much appeared like a warm, bubbly person on social media, there's at least one person, in her opinion, the real Snelling is far different than that image that she was putting out to the public. 20-year-old Sydney Kite went to high school with Snelling, and she gave quite the interview to the Daily Mail. She said that Snelling would take her anger out on people, saying, quote, while in high school, she tried to run over one of my closest friends with her Jeep. The bullying got so bad, my friend had to be pulled out of school and transferred to another because Laken had taken it so far. Kite also accused Snelling of cyberbullying with text messages. Now, Kite really didn't hold back in this interview, saying that Laken only hung out with people who were popular and had money, and she said that she was obsessed with her appearance. And on top of that, she said, again, that Snelling actually tried to run someone over with her Jeep. This is in the Daily Mail article that has been circulating. Now, I did reach out to Kite to get more information about her experience with Laken Snelling. I have not heard back, and we haven't confirmed with police that she tried to run anyone over. This, of course, just according to Kite on social media and through the Daily Mail. In covering this story, we looked up Laken Snelling on truthfinder.com. One of the key pieces of information we found there is that it does not appear that she has a criminal record, which is something that could factor into what her bond was and the conditions of her release. At Law&Crime, we partner with Truthfinder and we use it to get details on the people who are involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, it can be an excellent resource to give you some peace of mind, as it's one of the largest public record search services in the US, and with the paid subscription service, you get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone, and right now, you can get 50% off your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/OTC. Now, of course, there is the question of, does being an alleged bully actually translate to allegedly hiding your dead baby's body? Perhaps not, but it does paint a picture of the type of suspect Laken Snelling could be. At the same time, you also see her in a lot of pictures with friends, and it seems like she was often around people, so she certainly wasn't a loner. Laken Snelling has pleaded not guilty to the charges. We have not heard her side of the story just yet. We'll continue to monitor this. She is due back in court September 26th. Joining us now is Dr. Peter Valentin, the chair of the Forensic Science Department at the University of New Haven in Connecticut. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Knowing that police say that the baby was cold to touch when they found this, sad passed away baby in the closet, what does that tell you about how long the baby may have been there?
So it certainly suggests that a period of time has elapsed. And, what we'll have to be careful about here is not applying the kind of logic that we apply to adults and their loss of temperature as a function of time. Because clearly there is not much mass to a newborn, and so they're going to lose that body temperature very, very quickly. And so being cool to the touch also is a qualitative statement, right? So does that mean it's room temperature? Does it mean it's slightly less than the temperature we normally expect when we touch human skin? And so that might just mean that it's only a few hours post-mortem, meaning after the time of death. So it's going to be hard for us to make sense of exactly how much time that actually corresponds to, other than to say it's an obvious sign of death.
Yeah, because I know she was not at home at the time that police had arrived, and then they weren't able to locate her until about an hour later. But considering, and it is such a, it's a difficult story to talk about, but considering she said she gave birth in the home and then cleaned up from that birth, and then she said that she put everything she used to clean up, as well as the baby's body, according to police, into this bag that then goes into the closet. I mean, what timeline would you, I know you said a couple of hours, what timeline would you be thinking about right now about potentially when the birth happened? We don't know the cause of death of the child, but then police arrive around, I think it was 12:30 that day, 11:30 in the morning.
So unfortunately, I've had casework like this in my life as a detective, and so I would actually be looking at the other items that were in the garbage bag as well as indicators of how long ago this might have happened, how much drying occurred for things that were on the towel, what other indicators are there within the scene of the amount of time that has elapsed. There are going to be indicators within the scene that are going to tell you lots of things about whether or not she knew she was pregnant, what sort of behavior did she engage in when she realized she was in labor, how long ago did that happen. And so, these are subtle clues that you're going to want to look for to get a sense of her level of knowledge about what's happening there. And so, that closet, that bedroom, and her activities at around that time in the home are going to be the difference between her being charged with the crimes that she's charged with now, the unlawful disposal of a corpse, et cetera, and a manslaughter or a murder charge, which is really what you're thinking about when you wonder if the child is alive and that child is then put in the garbage bag. That changes things dramatically, and that's why this is such an important question. Was the child alive at the time of the birth?
Because, right, and if that child took a breath outside of the womb, I mean, it seems like that would elevate this story to a different level than it is right now, for as shocking as it is. How do you determine whether that child was alive when they were born as opposed to it being a stillborn baby?
So that is a complicated question to address, and in the cases that I've worked on and seen, it is cooperation between the forensic pathologist and those who investigated the scene to see if there are physiological signs to indicate breathing has occurred, whether there are indications within the scene itself that there are activities consistent with the child being alive outside the womb. And so, there is no checklist for this, unfortunately or fortunately, because it's such an unusual occurrence. But you are trying to gather enough information through observations within the scene and of the child's remains to form an opinion as to whether or not the child survived outside the womb for a moment. And it's a challenging decision to make because of the stakes involved here, for sure.
And when you, as a detective, previously in your career, and people have looked at Laken Snelling's social media, it seems she stopped posting. I think the last post was from June, and then she ends up giving birth, apparently in whether it was September or August, or it would have been August when this happened. I guess what stands out to you about the profile of her at this point, and how does a detective go about putting together kind of the personality of this woman and what may have led allegedly to this?
Yeah, so the obvious change in posting behavior to me is a great interview strategy. That's a very easy way to begin the conversation with somebody about their level of awareness. However, I would be looking for things that are more substantive than that. Are there purchases being made that you could more directly tie to a pregnancy? Are there things that are essentially irrefutable and specific to somebody being aware of a pregnancy? Again, because what we're trying to do is differentiate between somebody who is ignorant of the fact that they are pregnant, and this is a surprise. Again, as unusual as situation as that might seem, and somebody who is aware of the fact that they're pregnant and trying to conceal it. The change in social media activity, or the fact that she's not posting photographs of herself, might seem like she's trying to hide the pregnancy weight or the fact that her appearance is changing, whether or not she realizes it's pregnancy weight or not. But we would need more than that.
And I know that there's reportedly one of her ex-boyfriends has given a DNA sample to police, and they'll figure that part out of it. It seems that she's admitted to a lot of very shocking things already with the birth of the child, and then said that she was cleaning up after this birth had happened. Yet we don't know who the father is at this point. What do you make of that?
So, from an investigative perspective, I don't know how valuable that information is just yet. Clearly, you would like to know, but ultimately, I think what is most valuable, you can look at this two ways. It's who thinks they're the father, who's engaging in activity with her from the perspective that they believe that they're the father, because who actually is the father and who thinks that they're the father might be two different people. But from a forensic perspective, which is what I'm most concerned with, as they are, seizing evidence from that scene, is there an unknown male DNA profile in her room that might be suggestive of somebody assisting her at a critical point during this delivery? And again, since we didn't see what her room and the house looked like, we don't know what the scene was. We don't know what evidence was collected. That DNA profile, seizing of that buccal swab to get DNA, might have a much different purpose than what we are thinking about right now. It might not be for paternity purposes, but it might be for evidentiary purposes because of something that was found within the scene itself.
What would stick out to you? I mean, when you enter this scene, they get a phone call from, they're saying a third party. I don't know if it was a roommate, whoever it may be, who sadly discovers this child. And then if you are the officer or detective who's called to the scene to investigate this, I mean, a very scientific evidence collection, as all of them are. But I mean, in this case, you're dealing with a birth, an infant's body. I don't know about the umbilical cord or any of those other items that would have been found in the bag. Where this baby was found. I mean, how do you go about those initial moments as you're kind of taking in the room and figuring out what you need to grab as evidence?
So these are, even for seasoned investigators, a scene like this is extraordinarily challenging because of the frailty of your victim, the age of your victim, the tragedy. While every crime is a tragedy in many respects, this one hits differently. But what we have to do when we arrive at a scene like this is think about what's most important to preserve immediately. Because once a scene is finished, right, once the activities of the scene are done, that scene is essentially decaying in real time, right? Every bit of evidence that is there, the trace evidence in those places are slowly being destroyed and changing as a function of time. And so as you arrive there, what is so fragile, what is so precarious that it can't wait until the detectives and the crime scene investigators get there an hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours later? What needs to be documented right now, is something that is liquid now, but will be a solid later, important. And the fact that we're having a discussion about how long this child might have been alive, if at all, how long ago was the body put into the garbage bag, is all about time. And, the state of a liquid drying is about time. And so, the state of drying of a liquid, the temperature in a room is about time. So these, very ephemeral things, these very transient things within the scene have to be documented immediately. So you have to separate yourself from that emotional aspect of all of this and get to the business of documenting what you see in that scene without jumping to conclusions prematurely, and essentially preparing it for the more seasoned investigators who are going to do the more methodical crime scene investigation that we're accustomed to seeing on television.
Yeah, and speaking of TV, I mean, I think we probably take for granted sometimes how quickly a coroner can identify a cause of death, and we don't appreciate the work that goes into actually figuring out a cause of death in a complicated case. What do you take away from the initial autopsy being inconclusive when it comes to this child's cause of death?
Well, to me, it's not surprising, simply because there would probably not be, or let's say, it would not be surprising that there would not be outward signs of trauma for a newborn child for them to have been, for them to die. As simply putting your hand over their mouth would be sufficient. And so they would be asphyxiated, right? And there would be no signs. And that would lead to at least an initial inconclusive autopsy, because there are no physical signs present at the autopsy to suggest how they died. And so, asphyxia is a diagnosis of exclusion, in that there are no other physiological features or indications of how that person died. And so you're almost backed into the idea that, well, they died from deprivation. They died for a lack of oxygen, which is what asphyxia is. because I can't see anything else. But in a case like this is where the discussion and the cooperation and the interaction between the coroner, the medical examiner, and the scene investigators is so critical, because what might seem ambiguous at the autopsy table might become clearer and easier to understand when you start to get information from the scene itself to begin to make sense of things. So, there should be discussion, there should be interaction between those different facets of your initial investigation. So this doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, now, of course, you could have trauma, in which case it would be a very easy decision to make, but the fact that there was an inconclusive autopsy report, or at least an initial inconclusive autopsy report, is not surprising to me at all.
I also think of just going back to the responding officers. You get a call for an unresponsive infant. You don't know what you're going to be walking into, and they probably would not have expected the scene that they came upon on the day they responded to Laken Snelling's house. But how much training? Because I think of understanding all the different intricacies of evidence in that room related to an infant, a birth that had just happened, identifying pieces of evidence. I mean, how much training does the regular police officer or even detective, not a rural community, Lexington, Kentucky, but not the NYPD in terms of size and resources. I mean, how much experience and training do officers go through to prepare for something like this, to be aware just when it comes to a baby that has died and all the things that you might need to take in?
It's a great question, because the answer is, of course, it depends on where this is happening, right? How much does that agency spend on training? All police officers are given training as part of their academy instruction. All officers are given what is called in-service training. So on an annual or biannual basis, they're brought back in to get more training. However, how capable you are of reaching back and using that training is a function of how often you do something like that. And so most officers have not responded to a scene like this. And so even if they were trained on how to handle a scene like this, they might not remember the details. And they might approach it in a way that is much more generic. And they might not have remembered, the very specific thing that somebody told them, that if you're responding to, what might be the homicide of an infant, do this specific thing. And that detail is lost because they wrote it down once last year at training, but they've never seen a scene like that since. And what people need to remember is that no scene stays pristine. The first responding officers have to change that scene in order to do the things that they're required to do when they arrive. EMS, the fire department, was at the scene before the police were, and everybody would expect that life-saving measures would and should have been taken before anything else, as long as that scene was safe for the fire department to be there or EMTs to be there. And so those activities, of course, change your scene around. And, police training has no role in that. So the scene has been changed from that perspective. And so by the time the officers even arrive, the scene is not in its original state. It's been changed. And so when you add that component to the fact that the officer is arriving at a very unusual scene, that if they received any specific training on it, it was a long time ago, expect that I wouldn't even say that things are going to be missed, but you're not necessarily going to have this very precise, specific response to such an unusual event.
And Doctor, last question, just and one that I probably should have asked sooner, but I think about how she was not at home when police arrived. And it's just shocking. I know she's 21, she's young, but if she gave birth by herself in a house and then got up, and I don't know if she drove to wherever she was, but she leaves the home, she's out and about, which just seems, and then you see her at court and she's, and I know time had passed, but how does her not being home, her being out there, factor into how this investigation could play out?
It's a very good question, because it depends on what activities she was engaged in when she left or when the police found her. And without knowing those specifics, I probably couldn't comment in any real way. I think a lot of people are surprised at how ambulatory somebody could be right after giving birth. But in the cases that I've been a part of, that is what has happened, where they're upright and they're conversational, and you would be surprised. And so I'm not completely shocked that she was able to, leave the house and be somewhere else when the police arrived. But what activities she was engaged in, and whether or not they were activities to help her in some respects, or they were activities meant to conceal aspects of what she had just done at the house, whether she was trying to resume her life as if nothing had happened because that's what she thought she should do, maybe the answers to those questions will give us, useful investigative information as this moves forward. But it's hard to answer that in the abstract.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this story goes next. Very sad case playing out in Kentucky. Dr. Peter Valentin from the University of New Haven, chair of the Forensic Science Department. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.